Thank you all so much for being here with us today. I am so excited for this panel because it's discussing one of my favorite topics, which is sustainable fashion. There's a lot of different ways to talk about sustainable fashion, and we have two incredible speakers here today who are going to be focusing on creating a circular economy and really reducing our level of consumption. So just to kind of set the stage for why this is such an important topic that we wanted to bring to you all today, the fashion industry has made a lot of progress toward reducing their climate footprint. There's been a really large increase in awareness, but there's also been a rise in consumption. And in fact, people are buying 60% more clothing today than they were 15 years ago, but they're owning it for only half as long. So we're doing a lot of the right things, but we're still not seeing those results that we need to in order to really make a difference. So with that in mind, I'm so excited to speak to you both here today. Christy, I want to start with you. I am such a big fan of your company. It's very cool. I'm very excited for you all to hear about it. So for those unfamiliar with the term, what does a circular economy in fashion mean, and why is it important?
Yeah, great question. I think a lot of people have heard the buzzword, but don't actually know kind of what the actual implications are when you talk about circularity. I always like to ask this question, who here has too much stuff? Yeah, that's because we have a linear economy. So what happens today, and it's important to start there, is that we produce things, we manufacture things, and companies sell us things over and over and over again, and more and more and more. And there really isn't a great mechanism for figuring out what to do after use. And so circularity as a kind of principle is about keeping things in circulation, retaining the highest value, thinking about regenerative solutions. Basically, all those things that we make, if we could put them back and turn them into something else, or keep the cycle going, would really help with resources. It would help with carbon footprint. It would help just the cycle of consumerism have less of a negative effect. But to date, there haven't been great mechanisms or products or services that have helped people. And so that's kind of where we've developed a platform. We started actually, you mentioned for days, we started thinking through regenerative products. That's a component of circularity. If you make the products available for recycling, so from the right materials and the right way, you could recycle them. And that was met with great reception. But what we found is when we got into people's homes, the problem of stuff was an even bigger pain point.
And can you talk a little bit about the take-back bag?
Exactly.
And how that got incorporated into this system and really solved one of those key problems there?
Exactly. And so when I started talking to people, I was like, do you have too much stuff? Yes. I'm like, is it a pile? Everybody's like, it is. And I'm like, is it in a bag somewhere in your closet or your car? And they're like, how did you know? and so what we realized is this opportunity to engage people in that moment, create literally a product that said, we've got you. We'll help you recycle all that stuff you don't know what to do with. So we have a product called the Take Back Bag. Our customers buy it from us. It's really a recycling service, but it's big, it's fun, it's bright colors, it's joyful, and you can fill it up with anything from any brand, accessories, clothing, home goods, sheets, towels, and you mail it back to us like an online return.
Right, because some things you can't resell, and some things you don't want to donate. What do you do with the odd sock?
We'll take single socks, pit-stained t-shirts, stretched out pajamas. We'll take the whole bag, literally, and then we process that and we recycle that, and we keep 95% of it out of landfill, which is really important when you think of the opposing statistic that today 85% of all clothing ends up in landfill. We make 120 billion garments a year, and 85% of those go straight into the trash. So we're really trying to create a behavioral mechanism so people can create this new habit, engage with us, and reverse that waste stream. That's important. That collection component, super important. We also do that through the lens of incentive, which is really another component. I think, behavioral change is an important thing to kind of crack the code on. We've found a really engaging product, but we also incentivize this behavior. So we have a large rewards platform that kind of gives people the opportunity to get rid of the stuff they don't want and find the things they do want, and potentially get a little financial benefit there.
Oh, it's so cool. I'm such a big fan. You guys should all go and check out Trashy. It's a very fun service. Holly, you have an amazing company called Fun Day, where you are developing amazing sustainable shoes. I know that shoes are one of the hardest things to manufacture sustainably. And so I wanted to ask you, how are you doing this without letting the challenges of creating a sustainable product impact the creativity that you're looking to bring to the market?
Thank you. Yeah, just excited to be here. It's been a long and wonderful, challenging journey, and I'm excited to do it. Our form of circularity for Fun Day is really in the reshoe. So if we think about we've overconsumed, we've shared the facts that in the last 20 years we've more than doubled our consumption, yet at the same time we have to meet the consumer where they are and they want that consumption. So it's going to be really difficult to get people to change their habits. So I started looking at the way we did things in the food industry and the beauty industry and single-use plastics and multi-use, and was able to come up with Fun Day, which is a sustainable plant-based shoe where you pick your cone, pick your flavor, and put your cherry on top. So you
can you talk a little bit about the name Fun Day?
Yes.
And it's like Sunday, and how you kind of arrived at this and what you're hoping to achieve with it.
Yes, absolutely. So Fun Day is like ice cream sundae. We want to make it sustainable. Sustainability as fun as building an ice cream sundae. It's just as easy. It's picking your cone. I wanted the food analogy, pick your flavor, what lights you up, what makes you feel individual, what celebrates you. And then the multi-use shoe comes into play where it's like, I'm at the meeting, whoops, I'm going to the party, I gotta put the cherry back on top. But the name is really important in the education and transparency. I want people to think of ingredients just the way that they do. And I watched the trends. I was in marketing and media for the last couple of decades, and I really saw that the next generations are curious, which we should all be a little bit more curious on what are we consuming. And it happened first with food because we digest it, and then with beauty as your body consumes the lotions, and fashion was the next one. And then what I saw was there was an appetite for sustainability in fashion, yet I felt like the high-end luxury fashion wasn't served. And so that's the lane I went down. I grew up in California, I want to save the ocean, but I still love stilettos, and so I thought, no one's making these. So it was challenging. I've hand-sourced every single material, mostly plant-based and bio-based, even to the ingredient level of I'm 74 to 96% eco-chic. The lowest one I have is 55% bio-based.
I love that term, eco-chic. Cool, yeah, so Christy, you have talked a lot about closed loop systems, and you've created one yourself. And I'm wondering what you see going forward, because we've increased transparency in the industry, we've increased education, but within that closed loop system that does seem to be the answer to this massive problem, how do you see that evolving over the next 5 years?
Yeah, I think we're just getting started in a lot of ways. And when you think about a full system, a lot of it is dependent on how we make products, what our supply chain looks like. But when you think about products going out into the world, in order for something to be a closed loop system, you have to get them back. And I think to date, most of those collection systems have been very poor. The experience is poor, the incentive isn't there. It's stuck in some random, hard, inconvenient way, and consumers are just like, is it worth it? I don't know. Where is it? I'm not sure. So we haven't really created like a standardization of getting things back in a way that works for the consumer landscape at large. The thing, once you start getting things back, which we're doing, in bulk now, we've collected 5 million pounds of textiles in the last 12 months, is then you need a reverse supply chain. And that never existed before. Nobody ever wanted things back. In fact, most retailers are like, send it out the door, please don't send it back to me. So figuring out kind of the logistics system for receiving, tracking, tracing, putting things back into circulation and in their highest and best use is a complete redesign of the whole ecosystem and how it works. So I think it's convenience, it's incentive, and it's systems change alongside all the supply chain work that's being done.
Right. And that's what you're doing is really, really cool, because it really does start with the end of life cycle. And what I love about this panel is we have both here right now. And Holly, I wanted to ask you, so I know you mentioned that there are a lot of challenges when it comes to creating a sustainable shoe product. Can you tell us a little bit about what the main challenge is there, and going forward, how can other manufacturers kind of think about this problem?
Sure, absolutely. As we know, the landfills are a massive issue at the end of the cycle. One of the statistics in the fashion industry is that fashion actually is 10% of the carbon emissions, and it is greater than all shipping and all flights combined. And that actually comes from mostly the production side of things. So it's the fossil fuels, it's the cheap production,
the water,
it's offshoring, it's the water, it's the chemicals. And so it's really getting granular into the materials of what we're sourcing. So for me, it was doing a lot of research and with the partners. So the partners that I work with and the materials that I source, I am making sure that they are living up to their green standards and their sustainability certificates. They have special sustainable recycling for any chemicals, because there are still adhesives. Like we're not a purity yet, right? Mm-hmm. It's really, really hard. And so I think the more materials are available, that hopefully larger brands will start to adopt them. But it was a big challenge. I make my shoes in Italy. They love leathers. We ran into issues with prototyping and stretching and plant-based. So it's a work in progress. But the technology is there to create materials made from bio-based. It's non-food source. It's actually good for the environment. So hopefully more and more people will tap into the ingredients.
I'm so glad you said that the technology is there, selfishly, because that leads me into my next question. Christy, how do you think technology can help us address some of these challenges in the years to come?
Yeah, I think, again, you think about it front end, back end. I think on the front end, the consumer experience, the education you talked about, just how we're really engaging people in this topic in a way that feels value add or solving.
And for the record, you both do an amazing job of that. Their websites are very fun.
Yeah. That's super important. That's kind of technology as we know. I think on the back end, particularly through the lens of circularity, there's traceability is a huge component of this. When we started collecting a lot of product. I'm like, okay, great. How do we track what we got and where it goes? And how do we validate that? And people looked at me like, why would you want to know that? And so building in traceability into that system in a super efficient way, because a lot of this comes down to the unit economics, making the business model work. You can't spend a lot of time with the product. It has to be highly efficient, which leads you into kind of innovations on sorting and grading, optical reading, image recognition. How are we really taking that reverse supply chain and bringing it into a modern lens? And then all of that product gets funneled through. I ask people this too. I'm like, do you think there's like a big vat for clothes and it like goes through and comes out as something else? And people are like, kind of. And I'm like, no, that doesn't exist. And so we're working through really what are those recycling technologies at the fiber level, which are really new. Taking a polyester and turning it back into a yarn is like very recent technology. It's happening, it's there, but it's rarely scaled to date. Mechanical recycling for cotton. And so all of that, again, is a system. Circularity is a system. And so you kind of have to piece all of it together. But it's all technology based.
Yeah, and there's so many overlaps there with different industries, and that means that there's a lot of opportunity there, which is something that's really exciting. So I'm glad that we're having this conversation in terms of what we're able to do, like how we're going to see this industry progress. And I think that fashion is one of those industries where every single person can, in some way, shape, or form, relate to this problem, because we have a relationship with clothes. We all pick out an outfit at least once a day. We all spend some time shopping. And what I really appreciate about your message, Holly, is converting it to this idea of food and something that's very personal. And what do you guys think the average person can do to improve their own carbon footprint when it comes to building their wardrobe? And Holly, can we start with you?
Sure. I think remain curious.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of greenwashing. We've heard that term out there. People rode the, leathers are bad. A lot of plastics came out and said, we're vegan. They're not vegan vegetable based, which you can be. So I think it's keep the conversation going with your friends. Be curious. Share stuff that you know. Be relevant. Be very careful of greenwashing. There are a lot of major brands, even if it's not greenwashing and it's plastic, they're moved to zero, which I applaud everyone who's trying. It's hard to do, but look at the fine print. Like, what percentage are they actually sustainable, and what percentage, so even if that particular product mostly or maybe max 20-30%, maybe it's 5 to 10% of their entire product line. So it's really just asking the questions and doing a little bit more homework. I'm encouraged by the younger generations. They're very curious, and I think if we all adopt that, it'd be very helpful for the industry.
Awesome. Christy, what about you?
Yeah, I mean, again, we start kind of at the end and go back to the beginning. I think everything you said is incredibly relevant, but it can be overwhelming. The amount of information can be overwhelming. It's hard to educate yourself on things. What we found that's really interesting is, one, just step change. Like, once you start paying attention and do your first thing, you're gonna be like, oh, did that work for me? And I always say it has to fit into your lifestyle. Like, it can't, you don't need to overhaul everything overnight. It has to work with your price point, your financial situation, your lifestyle, your kind of way you want to operate in the world. What we found that's really interesting is by helping people with that end of life, they start to think about what they're purchasing, because it's a little bit like calorie counting. You're like, wait, I threw a bunch of stuff away. So, you know, that recycling mechanism is getting kind of a feedback loop going that's making people a little bit more aware. So for us, that's been really powerful, and I think, you know, we'll continue as that becomes habitual. But I think the more you can know and just try. Yeah.
I love that. So I want to end out this session by asking you both, what is a stat about the fashion industry that absolutely blows your mind, whether it's in the progress that we've made or in the work we have yet to do?
Oh gosh, we've covered so many facts. I think the one that just spoke to the fashion industry is producing more carbon footprint than the shipping and any of the freight and passenger airlines alone is just, it's absolutely startling, I think, how much it is. And then also,
especially when it comes to media coverage as well, because I feel like oftentimes certain things get covered a little bit more, and it's like, no, what are we actually dealing with here? What's the most efficient way to spend our time?
Yeah, and one segue over to what you're doing is, before it even gets to the consumer, 50% of everything that's produced gets pretty much thrown away before if a wholesaler hadn't picked it up in the older model before direct to consumer.
Yeah. I mean, I think tagging on to that, we've watched kind of waste patterns, and you talked about consumption growth. We used to throw 82 pounds of textiles away per person in the US. Now it's 112 pounds, so we're really rapidly escalating that. And yet still 1% are recycled and 15% are reused, and those stats haven't changed. So I'd really like to see us put more into a reuse cycle, because 70% of the world's population wears used clothing exclusively. There's actually a lot of opportunity there for market kind of redistribution.
And with the take back bag, it's pretty easy. I've done it. Anyway, thank you guys so much. This was awesome. Thank you, everybody.